IAD couldn't catch clap at a whorehouse. It doesn't matter what the show, David Simon certainly has a way with words. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you'll be among the first to know. Part 2. Very simple with the title of these episodes. This 6-episode miniseries continues on for We Own the City. With this episode, we peel the layers back a little bit more where we go further back in time, sort of like I thought we would. We are now in 2003, 2004 in this episode, quite a bit. What we're doing is we're learning more about Jenkins beforehand. But this episode as a whole is kind of just telling us that as though they have arrested Jenkins, though this is the person that they've sort of put the face on this corruption that is happening in Baltimore, it is clear that this has been happening long before he got there. And while he is no wallflower or innocent bystander and being swept up in the system, the pieces in here all existed before him, and that's sort of what this episode gives us. We'll start off in present day with Jenkins right after the arrest from the last episode, and he is still thinking that they got the wrong guy. He's talking about, oh, I'll be out of here by tomorrow, and if I miss my kid's game, I'm gonna sue everybody that's been here. He still thinks that he has the upper hand in this, and then he starts seeing some of the games that they're playing with him. They put him in an interrogation cell and they just leave him there, handcuffed. Games that he's played before, I would imagine. Feeling like he's now on the other side of that box. He just no longer has the power of the cards. He has a moment in the hallway where he passes by another of his task force, and Jamel, and he kind of pushes that thin blue line motif. And Jamel's like, yeah, okay. But he's not really feeling it. It's like, keep your mouth shut, don't say nothing, all that stuff. Trying to just put that into him. Jamel is hearing none of that. Jamel is telling everything under the sun. He is telling it all. He's like, yo, you want me to write a note about it? I can write a book. I tell you whatever you need to know. I'm going to tell it to you. That is how he is operating. Jamel is from that school. He used to be a part of the team that was with G-Money and Schroeder and all of them. The force that existed before Jenkins sort of came apart, they've existed. And so, but he's always sort of looked out for himself. He's been pinched before. And that's what we learned in this episode throughout all of this stuff. He's been pinched once, and he leaves the trail and tells a story that people, the money that they collect, the money they stuff, yeah, he stole it all. I've stolen it all. I've taken somebody's inheritance. I've done everything humanly possible, and I'll split that money. And people like the sergeants and Jenkins that you think are not in on this, the sergeants got to do this too, because over time, that we learned in Jenkins' past story, over time, you don't really get the money off of that. So you got to spread these hours out, take for multiple days, and kind of spread that out so that it looks like the arrests are piling up, and that your arrest rate and your jackets are increasing, so that you seem more important in police. But what we learned is nobody is actually doing policing. They are collecting numbers or collecting digits to make either themselves look good so that they can continue on their arrest rate, or they're trying to make the city look good. Like, there's a whole spot in Jenkins' story where his employer, when he is his field training in 2003, I believe is his opening day. He goes and his senior officer is like, yo, all that shit you learned in training and all that, ignore all that. This is Baltimore. And we're going to go over all these corners and make sure that everybody's off the corner. And in doing so, it is not to kind of keep the streets clean, as it seems, just to make sure that these folks aren't shooting at each other. And if they don't shoot at each other, the murder rate drops. And if the murder rate drops, the current mayor can then become the current governor. And that is the vicious cycle that they're doing. Not trying to keep anybody safe, not trying to police any of the neighborhoods, just literally filling a quota so that we can make the person that's in charge further in charge, and then just keep this system of corruption going. And so everything that Jenkins learns and is doing currently, he learned from his senior officer, and thus we get a sequence at the end where we see where Yang, his new field officer, comes in 2005, and he teaches him that same thing, like, yo, all that stuff you learned, F all that. Because by the point in time, 2003, he's still bushy-eyed and wide open, kind of like, oh, I'm going to do this the right way. And then it starts trickling out in 2004. He starts seeing that the money that he's making is not the money he could be making. He starts seeing people making more on that, and Jenkins is like, I want a piece of that. So by the time we get to 2005, he's fully invested. He doesn't have the quote stakes of his task force yet, but you can see the seeds of all the shady shit that he's about to get into is all there. Jamel points out while he's doing all his stuff for this FBI investigation, they're like, yo, IAD had me. I was pinched. They suspended me with pay. And then they put me back in the task force with the most crooked people on the face of the planet. So that's kind of effed up on them. And the look on the FBI agents are kind of like, what the fuck? Like, really? Like, that's what they did? Just keeping the cycle going. There's no ramifications, or there's no actual onus or acceptability of punishment here. Everybody's kind of just like, yeah, we put them on timeouts so that until you guys die off of it, and then we'll bring them back and just hide them away here so that you don't have to worry about them anymore. And that's what they've been doing. We do a little bit more of Suter. It's his first day of homicide. He used to have been on the same task force as G Money and all of them, but he has kind of cleaned up and gone over to homicide. And he has a moment where he and his new partner or new co-partner, I don't know really the levels of theirs, because they let him go out on his own to do the homicide detective work. But they meet in the parking lot. He passes by G Money. G Money kind of makes him just like, yo, you did homicide. Ain't no money over in dead bodies. Like, come on back. What are you doing? Like, we get all this money. And he says that he's joking. He makes it because he sees that Suter's not really ha ha ha, but he lets him know that, like, yo, Suter used to be, let you know that Suter used to take a taste. He used to, but something's happened where he no longer wants to do that, and he has kind of gone this way while the rest of them have gone that way. Then we just see a whole sequence of Suter doing his whole homicide detective work and trying to kind of do things the correct way. Whereas everybody else who we see parallel police work is just shoddy work. They're being overly aggressive, abusive, taking money, pinching people, and putting people, if one person's holding, in one of Jenkins' stories, if one person's holding, then they're making everybody who's in that entire area an accessory. They're putting instead of just putting one bag on the one person who's actually holding, they're going to split it up and put a little bit on all three, because marijuana has such a big charge, and you can lock people up for stupid charges. There's a whole sequence that's just sad where they're arresting a bunch of people on BS charges. And to get them out on that jail that night, they have to sign something that says, hey, blah, 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 blah. I agree to these charges, but I just don't want to go home. And the charges, they're going to get dropped anyway, but they'll drop the charges if you do this and this and that. So most people just sign away without thinking. But in truth, if they just waited the day out, they were going to be let go anyway because they don't have anything charges on them. But a lot of people don't know the system. And that is what most police folks in this town, but police folks period, are assuming that folks don't know the rules and regulations in the system, and thus they can kind of game it. And then because they are the people of aggressive enough power, they can abuse it. And there's a sequence where Nicole is doing a lot of groundwork to find a little bit more on Herschel and just some of the corrupt stuff. And she gets to an officer who, I believe it's Miller, he's a 35-year-old at a ripe age, prime age officer, but he's been put out to pasture. And because he speaks his truth, he speaks his mind. And he tells her of a story of a young man who was just walking home in a hoodie and got beat up pretty bad, had his forehead sliced open, and it became an ugly and just terrible situation. And it went from like, oh, you are a young man in daylight, but in a crime area, you look like you are doing something shady because you got a hoodie on, and don't look like you got your head on a swivel, which if anybody of color has been in any places, you're always looking at your exits, you're always looking, you should be anyway, always looking at your checks. That's just what you do. You just check everything. You look around all the time. So it may seem, they're using that to seem like it's shady, but the poor man was just trying to make it home, similar to Trayvon Martin. And Miller, not being the officers on duty, kind of just saw it from afar. He spoke up about it, but my man has a gash that's like right across his forehead, and Nicole kind of tries to play it off, and it's like, Because he mentions like, yo, the shorties ain't gonna like me like this. And like he's like, you're gonna be all right. But you can tell like this kid's scarred for life off of something that was not needed or necessary, and not actual police work. She keeps digging and she keeps digging. And then the episode ends with her going to the bar and having sort of a one-on-one with Herschel. And they're tit for tat. And Herschel shuts her down pretty quick. He's like, yeah, I've done things the correct way. I'm doing this and this. And Herschel puts this wall up because she goes in as a journalist, but he's like, you're coming at this as a prosecutor. You're trying to end this. And she's like, no, I'm just trying to tell a story. I'm trying to do a journalistic integrity story. And he's like, I don't want any parts of this. And he just shuts her out. He's like, good day, miss. And it just ends with her walking out and him kind of just like, I'm stonewalling you. I do not have to answer these questions because you've got nothing on me. I've gotten by, I've gotten off so many times. People make complaints all the time. That's just the way the world goes. People complain. I'm still here. I'm still doing my job. There's nothing that is stuck enough with me that you need to be having a conversation with me about this while I'm drinking my beer and eating my food and I'm giving my boy down there a couple more beers. So get the hell away from me. This conversation's over. And that's how he treats it. Because truthfully, there's nothing to stick on him. This game is so tied up and in a circle and in a bow and a knot that how do you get in there? How do you untangle all the mess and muck that this police organization has, specifically for this show, Baltimore, but just policing in general? How do you get up underneath and kind of get in the muck of all that is sort of been built up over years? The only other thing that really happens is the McDougal, Hawk, and their new partner, the name escapes me at the moment, the person that they joined task force with, they are going back and forth with what to do with Anthony. And so they decide to put basically they talk to their superiors and say that we've had this second tracker for ages and no one's claimed it, but Anthony sort of points them towards G-Money. He's like, yo, I'm gonna stop talking to y'all because one of my people that I know is a cop. And I feel like this might all be connected. So I'm gonna just quiet because somebody kicked in my door before y'all came through. And they kind of like, oh crap, so we're missing something. So they put the tracker back in play. And that is sort of they're kind of basically putting cheese out to catch the rat. And that's sort of where that story kind of stops and starts. There's not really too much that happens with them other than just kind of getting further down that maze to get to the point where we're going to know that eventually 2 years they catch up and catch Jenkins. And this episode ends with, like I said, with Nicole getting walked out, but Jenkins sort of have a revelation in his cell that he is no longer the guy. He sees Jamel walk by his cell, and he kind of knows that Jamel told everything. Every single, he sung it from the rooftops. And he's fucked. And he knows it. Again, another solid episode. I do like seeing the past and present of what Jenkins was and what he's become, how he was a little bit more innocent, a little bit more malleable, but the streets, his superior, and what he actually went through in his life, like him having to get money, has molded him into this just ugly mess, and now that cycle just keeps happening and happening and happening. And you need cops like Miller or DOJ folks like Nicole to kind of get in and ask why is this way. David Simon makes you ask questions, makes you take a mirror and look at things, and it's ugly. It is unfortunate. But it's true and it's real. So another solid episode, part 2 of We Own This City. I already can tell that whenever we get to the end of this, because this is based on real life, there's not going to be a resolution that we get. And so it's just going to just feel like we've just watched ourselves get slapped in the face several times. But I think it's important to see, and it's important a lot of times to have that mirror come up to you, because if you don't have these discussions, A lot of folks are gonna put their heads in the sands like ostriches, and you'll never know about it. So, what did you guys think about part 2 of We Own the City? Leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. Are you digging the series so far? I know we only got 4 more left, but so far, I'm on board. I would love to see a little bit more of Suter, and I would love to. I know this is more of a Jenkins-centric episode. I would like the next episode if we can get a little bit more into the McDougal-Hawk triangle of them figuring out stuff. Just because of all the characters, I think those are the guys that I know the least about and care the least about, and I think we need to get them on board for me when we do spend those moments on them, that I can pay a bit more attention. Because for me, when they come on screen, I'm kind of like, I don't know them enough. Give me back to Jenkins, or give me back to Herschel, give me back to Nicole, those folks that kind of have me as a viewer invest more. So give me a little bit more McDougal and Hawk, so I can kind of get to know and care more about them. But that's all I got negatively to say so far. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name. That's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any other place podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.